In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through a showing writing essay which was written by a former student several years ago. The place to start would be to point out a few of the guidelines that you're going to execute for your own essays. When you see the guidelines, you'll notice that you're asked to select a prompt of one of several prompts that I'll give you. And in this case, he selected this prompt: write a showing essay about a time that you spent outdoors. The next step will be then to name the specific topic of your prompt. The topic of my showing essay is a camping trip with my Boy Scout troop. And then the next step, or the next guideline, will be then to name the attitudes or the tones that you're hoping to convey in your showing writing essay. And in this case, he's really wanting to convey these attitudes of agitation, uneasiness, fretfulness, alarm, and nervousness. And so those will be the initial guidelines you'll have to execute. Of course, the first thing will be your MLA heading, and these three things will appear after that. So now let me show you how this writer employed these 7 features of showing. Let's start with how he did employing specific images and examples. So if you look at his sentences, I'll start reading a few of them. The steel toes of my Merrill hiking boots crunch against the gravel, mist spinning around the campsite. Scattered in the dirt and gravel, the steel tent rods resemble overturned headstones. So just in these 2 sentences, in all these sentences, the writer is doing a great job of showing specific examples from this camping trip that display, that suggest, that imply these attitudes of agitated, uneasy, fretful. Merrill hiking boots, for example, crunch. Steel tent rods resemble overturned headstones. Oily bead of sweat tumbles. Eyes scrape the sweat. Fingers tangled in matted clumps. Branches wobbling in the twisting winds. Water bleeds through the roof. So all really great images because they appeal to the senses, and maybe more importantly, they demonstrate those attitudes that the writer is wanting to demonstrate. So now let's see how well the writer executed using concrete singular nouns primarily. So if we go through his sentences, what we should be seeing is his use of these types of nouns that really allow us to see, touch, taste, hear, and smell. And so steel toes, boots, gravel, dirt, rods, sweat, dust, fingers, clouds. So all these nouns that I'm circling are nouns that again appeal to the senses. We're focusing primarily on the concrete and on the singular instead of the abstract. Notice this just doesn't simply say my shoes, but instead it really zooms in and it focuses on the singular and the specific. Now I'll show you how well the writer employed action verbs in the present tense and in the active voice, which active voice simply means that the subject performs the action of the sentence, as opposed to the action being performed on the subject. So I hit the ball instead of the ball was hit by me. So if we go through these sentences, then what you're going to see is that really rarely, if at all, does the writer use any linking verbs, but instead really relies on really vivid action verbs that again demonstrate those tone words of agitation, fretfulness, etc. So a great verb like crunch, tumbles, sweat tumbles, splatters, I scrape, fingers tangle, clouds hang, rumble, trees groan, needles dart, raps, bleeds. And so all of these verbs are very active, but again, and maybe more importantly, they're showing these tone words up here. The next skill that you're required to execute in your showing writing essay is elaboration. And again, what is this skill really about? It's about your ability to show or explain in greater detail. And so if we look at these sentences written by this particular writer, what you'll notice is that he does a great job of elaborating on images and examples. And so if we look at his sentences, He begins with this initial image of the steel toes of my Merrill hiking boots crunch against the gravel, miss spinning. Notice in the next sentence he elaborates on the gravel. Then he moves on to a new example. An oily bead of sweat tumbles from my right temple. And then notice in the next sentence he elaborates on the sweat. And then he moves on to a new example. Shadowy clouds hang. And then in the next sentence he elaborates a little bit on the clouds. And so we see this pattern repeating itself of here's an image or an example from this camping trip that illustrates these attitudes of agitated, uneasiness, etc. And then right after that, in my next sentence, instead of moving forward to my new image or my new example, I'm going to elaborate on that for a bit so I can extend your understanding of it so that I can show it in greater detail. So basically, the sentences kind of look like this. Sentence 1A, and then sentence 1B. Sentence 2A, and then sentence 2B. So we're really trying to practice this skill of slowing down your thinking and being a little bit more deliberate, not rushing ahead, and showing in greater detail, elaborating on your examples in greater detail. This is probably the toughest skill that you're going to try to execute in this showing writing essay. So the next skill is really going to measure your ability to employ precise diction. Employ words that imply or suggest these tone words rather than you outright telling me. Again, if we go through these sentences, you'll see that the writer was really deliberate about word choice, because words like crunch, words like tumbles, bleeds, dart, groan, raps, cracks, bite, wobbling, scrape, matted, all shadowy, plasters, burn, all these words do a great job of promoting those attitude words. They're very deliberate choices, and that's what word choice, that's what diction is. So in the end, when I read your showing writing paragraphs, I have to be able to see in every sentence a deliberate choice or deliberate choices of words that you're using to exhibit the tone words that you list at the top of your essay. The next skill that you'll be required to execute in your showing writing essay is, can you demonstrate that you have an ability to limit the listing of adjectives and adverbs? No one's saying that you can't use adjectives and adverbs, but you need to be really deliberate and judicious with their use. So if we go through this paragraph, I mean, you'll see adjectives for sure. Steel toes, Merrill hiking boots, steel tent rods, oily bead, fingers tangled, matted clumps, shadowy clouds. So the writer's definitely using adjectives, but the writer's using the right adjectives, not the almost right ones, and more importantly, not listing 3 adjectives before a noun, but really focusing their employment of adjectives a little bit more precisely. And so that's, again, what you're being required to do here. Exhibit deliberation and precision with your use of adjectives. And don't forget about one of our first lessons about adjectives. How about instead of putting those adjectives before the noun, you shift them after the noun? No one says you always have to put them before the noun. In this case, this writer tended to do that quite a bit. That maybe is one improvement that he could make to his adjective use. And the final showing feature that you're going to be required to execute is varying syntax. This writer does a great job of varying the way that his sentences look. If you notice, no 2 sentences really begin alike. I mean, we have maybe an exception or exceptions here. These 2 sentences begin the exact same way. But for the most part, these sentences look very different from one to the next. The steel toes of my Merrill hiking boots scattered in the dirt and gravel. An oily bead of sweat I scrape. Shadowy clouds, branches wobbling, the wind bites, hail raps, as thunder cracks. And so, again, I'm asking you from sentence to sentence, be deliberate. And if you began your sentence in a particular way, how about in the next sentence you begin it differently? How about you arrange the words differently? So this week when I introduced this showing writing essay assignment to you, this is what you're trying to execute. In the end, you're going to write me 10 sentences total where you are going to be asked to deliberately execute these 7 features, to really be very intentional with showing specific images and examples, relying primarily on the concrete and the singular in terms of noun use, using really great action verbs in the present tense and active voice, elaborating extensively on examples, not rushing forward and moving from one example to the next very quickly, but extending the reader's understanding of an image or example that you present, really exhibiting precise word choice, limiting your use of adjectives and adverbs, and varying the way that your sentences look. So now that you've finished watching this online tutorial, go ahead and complete those outcome statements by simply typing them in the assignment link on Canvas. And in the next couple of days, we'll discuss in more detail the showing writing essay, and we will practice a little bit more in class.